Welcome adventurers and mercenaries, I'm your guide Gamergeekazoid, and let's get straight into building a D&D character. The first thing to come up with is what sort of character concept that you want to play. Don't worry about the other party members and what they're doing, just see what looks appealing to you. Also, know your playstyle. Would you like to play spellcasters? If so, what kind? A bookish nerd who will one day rule the world? A happy-go-lucky musician that inspires others with song? Or perhaps a pact with a demon for some cheap magic? Maybe spellcasting isn't your kind of deal. Maybe you want to swing swords. If that's the case, would you rather be someone well trained in martial arts to a fine point, or yell at the top of your lungs and see how far your axe embeds itself in your enemies? If you need help deciding, I would suggest looking at the blurbs about each character class in the player's handbook, so you know what to get a feel for what kind of character you're getting into. The reason why I suggest looking into the character classes is because it will mechanically dictate what you can do and what you're good at, as well as what you cannot do and what you're bad at in the game. Next, after deciding what kind of character concept you want to play, we'll have to start with the backbone of your character, which is your ability scores. These make up the base of every mechanical role that your character is being constructed with. There are many ways to select your ability scores. The most popular by far is rolling. The method in which you create your ability scores will be up to your dungeon master. Let's start with the different methods for rolling ability scores. Rolling. If you want to take a chance with Lady Luck, this is your best way to do it. Rolling is the most popular way of generating ability scores. This is typically done in two ways. First, and most popular, is rolling 4d6 and subtracting the lowest result, or straight up rolling 3d6 and adding the total. You will roll a total of 6 times, one for each ability score, standard array. If you don't want to take a chance or do math, standard array is your best friend mercenary. Standard array goes as follows: 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15. All you have to do is place where those numbers go. Point by. Lastly, I'd like to cover point by. This is the methods wizards use. Math wizards, that is. Point by is the most complicated of all three, but lets you have the most control over your character. Personally, I like it because it keeps things balanced and optimized for their character scores if that's the way they want it. Point by starts with 27 points total for you to spend, and each of your ability scores starts at 8. When you spend 1 point from the 27 point pool, that point increases that said ability score by 1, up until 13. Then it takes 2 points to increase your ability score by 1, up to a maximum of 15. Let me give you an example. We start at 8, right? And say we want to increase it to 14. It costs 1 point to get to 9, another to get to 10, another to get to 11, another to get to 12, another to get to 13, and 2 points to get to 14. So, 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 2 equals 7 points. You spend your points to increase your ability scores like this. You've spent 7 points on this ability score, so you are left with 20 points to spend on your other ability scores. Remember that you can only go to a maximum of 15 and only have a maximum of 27 points to spend. Great. Now that we have generated your ability scores, let's assign them. You can assign them as optimally or as unoptimally as you like. Once they are put into place, the rest of the sheet should not be as difficult if you follow along. After assigning its scores, add the appropriate ability modifier to the sheet. This is determined on page 13 of the player's handbook. Remember how I said to think of a character concept of what you want at the beginning of this video? This is where it comes into play. First, let's start with your character's background. Think of this as, what did my character do before becoming an adventurer? Were they a religious apocalypse or a sage? Maybe a lone wanderer in the wilderness? These backgrounds are on pages 127 through 141 of the player's handbook. Read at least the first paragraph of each background to see which background fits your character concept. If you see a background that really pops out at you and says, yes, this is what my character is or was, then go with that one. Your background will give you proficiencies depending on which background you choose to take. Next, fill in the dot by the skills on the character sheet where it says which skill proficiencies that the background lists. Next, write the language or tool proficiencies you get in the other proficiencies box underneath the ability scores on the character sheet. Then, add any equipment your background gives you underneath the attack boxes on the character sheet where it says equipment. Lastly, add the feature that your background gives you under the features and feats tab underneath the personality traits. Optional. You can roll to choose personality traits the character has provided on the tables by the backgrounds. Personally, I don't mess with them that much, but they're an option to flesh out your character if you so choose. Before getting on to the final stages of your character creation, you should choose a character, race, or species. The most common species found in D&D are located on pages 18 through 43 of the Player's Handbook. These races/species grant your character bonuses to your 6 core stats in one or more ways. Add those modifiers to the ability scores, not your ability modifiers. If your species happens to have a subspecies or subrace, make sure to include those bonuses as well. Lastly, concerning race, should there be any special abilities that your race possesses? If they do, write them down in the features/feats column under of the character sheet. If your race/subrace happens to have skill proficiencies, make sure to fill in the bubble that your race tells you to fill the skills with that you're proficient in. If your ability score changes with the added modifier from your race, be sure to update the modifier as needed. Lastly, when it comes the meat of your character class. This largely defines what you can do in the game. These classes are located at page 45 of the Player's Handbook. Then go to your respective class page shown on the screen. Good. Once you've found the class you've picked for your character, you must first calculate hit points. This is found on the title page of your class, usually a number plus constitution modifier. Next, fill in your saving throw proficiencies just like skill proficiencies earlier. Next, choose the skills you will be proficient in from your class list and fill them in. Next, you will choose your character's equipment. This will be under the equipment section of each class. Denote which equipment you choose in the equipment part of your character sheet. Lastly, denote the class features under feats and features on your character sheet. You can find these and what they do on the class table at the beginning of each class and subsequently on the pages describing the class abilities and features. Finally, you can calculate the finishing details. First, let's start with your skills. Fill out your skill proficiency bonus as a +2. Then go through all your skills and saving throws and put the bonus to where you filled out the dot and add another +2 to it. Next, depending on what you've chosen as a weapon, will determine your attack stats. Under the weapons table on page 149 of the Player's Handbook, fill out which weapons or weapons you have and fill out the attack modifier. The attack modifier is strength for melee weapons plus your proficiency bonus if your character is proficient in the weapon provided by your class, and ranged weapons use dexterity plus your proficiency bonus if your character is proficient in the weapon, also provided by your class. The only exception is finesse weapons, meaning you could use strength or dexterity as the attack modifier plus proficiency if applicable. Lastly, denote the damage die you have to roll plus the strength modifier if it's a melee weapon, or plus a dexterity modifier if it's a ranged weapon, or either one if it's a finesse weapon. Next is armor class. Look at the armor you chose on page 145 of the Player's Handbook. Calculate it according to the armor class column. Next, calculate your initiative, which is just your dexterity modifier. Your speed is determined by your race. Lastly, if you are a spellcaster, you can calculate your spell save DC and attack modifier by looking at the class's spellcasting page. An extra step for spellcasters is to choose your spells as well. You can find your spells on the class lists on page 207 through 211. Depending on which class, you may be limited to the number of spells you have to choose, so please read carefully on the class you've chosen. And that's how you create a character mechanically. Good job on making it all the way through, and if you like this content, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe with the bell icon turned on. And I wish you, adventurers and mercenaries, a great day.